G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome back to another video, and welcome back, finally, to the Nations Cup, the GT World Series Nations Cup, the official Nations Cup for 2022. We're of course back on Gran Turismo 7, and this combination was from a couple of weeks ago. It's taken me a bit of time to get around to actually editing this, due to my quite compact schedule, let's say. But we're here in a strange combination, actually. We're back at Suzuka. We'll talk about everything in a minute. We'll just get through this opening lap action, as you can see, with this Civic Type R touring car by Honda. But everyone's a bit tentative through the opening turn. We don't want to run off the track. I do happen to know that poor Konzio, the blue car that's just ahead of Oa Yogurt there, started on pole position. So he's been absolutely shafted through the opening of this race. McEwen up the inside of Oa Yogurt, heading up through the snake section. He's not going to get around the outside of this slightly off-camber right-hander, and then we're looking up here. I had a car on my right-hand side there, and I was careful to not try and lose that position, but in doing so, I just slightly balked McEwen a little bit heading through there, but they're all going a little bit argy-bargy up towards Degner 1 there, so McEwen is swiftly back on the back of Konzio. The two teammates directly ahead of me, so we've got to make sure, we've got to watch out for any untoward transgressions between the pair of them up ahead. Big gap behind now. They, I think Masume ran a little bit wide out of Degner 2. Really easy to do, actually, and quite slow through here. Just bumping McEwen ever so slightly. Apologies for that one. We still get through there. Okay, we're back sort of, we've been balked a little bit there, and we're now right on the nose of Corey, who's overtaken Masume. We've got to be careful for a move up into Spoon, because it's one of the better places on the track to go for the move in these particular cars. But thankfully, what is a grace to my eyesight is that they're running side by side behind, so that should hopefully open up that gap as we head out onto the exit down the back straight, and that's that gap opened up behind and a slight little air gap up ahead. Okay, but this combination, you have seen, we're back at Suzuka again. It must be just the Japanese love Suzuka, because PD seem to have a little bit of they seem to be a little bit rocked up for Suzuka at the moment, so we're here every second week. I don't really mind, because it's quite a good track, to be honest, but we do have to be careful not to overuse anything, because if you use too much of a good thing, it starts to become not so much of a good thing. But it's a little bit of a strange combination to actually have as the inaugural Nations Cup round in GT7 here, because we're driving this Honda Civic Type R touring car, little FF touring car homologated thingamajiggamabobby, driving here today. It's not quite the flagship Nations Cup combo that you'd expect, maybe a Group 3 around here, or maybe harking back to whatever might have been the opening Nations Cup for GT Sport might have been interesting, but no, we're here, a little one-make race, so not quite the absolutely exciting combination we'd probably expect to be the premier round, but it's okay. We didn't have too much time to get up to the pace here, so we're not quite fighting where I'd like to be. But as we meet back to the action, we've come up behind Oa Yogurt. He was ahead of McEwen at the opening stages of the race, but McEwen is honestly a world-class driver. He's a little bit off the pace here. He wasn't enjoying the car, which is completely fair, because it's a weird, drives very strangely. We can talk about that one later. So he's not quite where he wants to be, but Oa Yogurt was ahead of him. He didn't quite have the pace compared to McEwen, and has now fallen back within move range here. I head up the inside of Spoon, and he just gives too much space and ends up pushing himself way wide instead of actually trying to stick it around the outside there. So I'm straight up the inside, and I get a pretty good exit out of this second part of Spoon as well, out onto the back straight, and that gap to Oa Yogurt behind has opened up to 0.7 of a second. We meet back to the action here, because honestly nothing too much went on, just set some consistent 224s. Gap ahead is 1.6, gap behind open to a second, but McEwen makes a grave error here. He goes off at turn 1, which is so easy to do at Suzuka. We don't even have downforce in these cars to actually help us stick onto the track. I would say the more downforce you have, sometimes the easier that turn 1 can become. For example, I know in a Group 2 you can absolutely fly through Turn 1 and the car feels so planted. But in this thing, it's floating, it's stodgy, it's all on top of the road, it's sliding all over the shop, and it's so difficult to get right. Something's happened to Konzio as well. He's fallen out of the pack up ahead as well. So he's not had the race that he was looking for, having started from the pole position. But now that McEwen has made that error, he's recovering from his dirty tyres that he's had from going off the road. But he's definitely within move range here, and given we've got 2 laps to go... Oh, Konzio goes off the track as well. If we play our cards right here, we could potentially have 6. And that would probably be quite a good points haul, to be completely fair. And we might leave the combination there if we are able to actually get the points we're after. So let's have a look. We've got to try and get past McEwen, but do so in such a way that we don't lose touch with Konzio, because these 2 drivers ahead of me are definitely faster. But if I can get ahead of them, I can probably stay ahead, because this kind of car is actually quite difficult to get moves done. It's so easy to actually it's so easy to have the car not stick the way you want it. So if you're trying to get a move done, you hanging around the outside, you know, you risk understeering straight off the track. So we've got to try and get past McEwen as quick as we can, and this was the first opportunity I had to do so around the outside of 130R. It's really not the place to do it, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. So you have to be so careful, and we're in fact too careful, because we left some margin on the table on the exit there, and McEwen's able to defend that position. And in doing so, instead of getting that move done and sort of being just about within touching distance of Konzio, all we've done is slow us both up, or all I've done is slow us both up. So not the best attempt there, but given that was the story of the race, I had to essentially get these 2 moves done as quick as possible before the drivers got away. That was the first opportunity I had, so I had to go for it. I have a look down into Turn 1 here, and I think maybe that's a little bit of a more optimistic move. Oh, I'm straight off the track here. I think I doubled down, shifted into 3rd gear, and Aoyoga capitalises. I'll give him a slight bump on the way through, and he ends up off the track. I have to wait up for him there. I'm not able to actually complete that overtake there after having bumped him off the track. And now all through here, he's going to have dirty tyres, but I can't pass him because it's all my fault. So by the time we get to the hairpin here, I think Aoyoga's just about recovered, and now any moves from here on are fair game. So we're going to be getting into the slipstream, heading down towards Spoon now through the long 300R that we call 200R, sorry. That's 300Rs heading down towards Turn 10 at Fuji, isn't it? Up to Turn 13 at Spoon here at Suzuka's 200R. Try to get the same move done that we did earlier in the race on, I think it was also Aoyoga. Try to get a repeat move there. Not quite going to happen. Aoyoga to learn from his past mistakes. So we're going to focus on getting the best exit we absolutely possibly can. Slowing it up early for the entry to the apex and punching it out on the exit. Got to try and get as straight of an exit as possible in this FF car here, because you can just power understeer straight off the road. Up the inside at 130R, let's see if we can get this done. Jump on the brakes, make sure to leave him room on the exit, which we do. He does go off the track, however, onto the AstroTurf, so we're not going to defend the inside here, and Aoyoga is straight back down the inside there, and as we head through the last chicane, all we can do now is try and get the exit, but Aoyoga, I think, was in 3rd gear. You can normally use 4th out of the exit there because it ends up being faster by the time you get to the end of the front straight. But if you've only got that tiny bit to do, I think that 3rd gear was quicker. But it's, at the end of the day, going to be a rather disappointing 9th position. And I say disappointing because I feel as though I left some positions on the table. I had the opportunity at 6th if I played all my cards right, but maybe I think in a perfect case scenario I could have got 7th, and as you can see there, 7th was worth 264 points. Myself only got 234, so not quite satisfactory, and so much so that I decided to go again into the 2nd slot, and we qualified in 9th. I learned a new start technique. I had a feeling on the first standing start that 1st gear was too short, so I decided to use 2nd there, and it's proved to be very well. So we're up into 8th. We've obviously had a pretty good start there, so you just got to focus on keeping it on the road, keeping it nice and tentative as we did in 1st slot. We get through there. Why does this happen? But unfortunately for me, I get slightly levered off the road, and I think Hyperdrift kind of does a similar thing to NIF, unfortunately. So Smokescreen, Hyperdrift, we're having absolute shockers here at the 2nd slot of the Nations Cup in the Honda Civic Type R touring car at Suzuka. And what that does now is it puts me right at the back, And because this is second slot, the points are not as high, so we have to try and finish as high up the grid as possible, and I normally expect to do so in second slot when a lot of the heavy hitters have already completed their, or achieved their points target in the first slot. So it allows me to sort of fight further up the grid. But because I'm now down behind these slower drivers, and given the type of car we're in, all on a one-make race, some of these moves are quite difficult to do, and the moves tend to take a long time to complete. We've got past Green Goldfish at the chicane. We're heading down the inside of Shushmi at Spoon here, so we were side by side all the way through 200R. Shushmi does a little bit of a better job at hanging it around the outside here at Spoon than Oeoga did in the first edition of this move in the first slot. So he's managed to translate this move up the inside of Spoon to a side-by-side moment down the back straight, heading up towards 130R. However, I'm not sure if Shushmi is backing out or just not quite maximising his gear changes, but he falls in behind. We don't actually run side-by-side through 130R, however, he is close enough here. Oh, have a look down on the radar. He spins out. He's straight onto the outside barrier and has released Green Goldfish back right behind me here. But I was able to extend the gap to Green Goldfish. I make a mistake. I almost do exactly what Shushmi did. But we're now sort of coming up towards lap 6 here. I think Crimson has run deep into the chicane. He's off the track here and rejoins and goes out. I'm able to get past him there. But yes, I was faster than Green Goldfish, so that gap extended. And I managed to catch up to these drivers who were the drivers I qualified around. So we go back up the inside of Corey here. So we qualified just behind Corey, I think, but we got the move done straight off the start thanks to our good launch. But that's all we were able to do, so you can see I spent the whole race actually just recovering, getting back to where I qualified in the first place. So yeah, instead of moving up the field from where we started, we had to move up the field from the back because we got levered away, or levered off the track. Unfortunately, only 210 points, so we've taken a points hit there compared to the first slot. For those that are not aware, you take your most recent point score, so you've really got to decide whether or not going in the next slot is going to be worth it. Can I get out of the pits first, please? Yes, 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 yes! Come on, that's how it's done. Alright, eyes forward, don't even look behind. So there is an element of risk in going in another slot because you can end up getting a point score less than the one you had in the previous slot, but unfortunately you take your most recent, so you lose that first result. So that's the risk there, and we didn't fall on the correct side of said risk. But thankfully for this slot, it actually gives us the best chance of getting a really good qualifying time here because I got out of the pits first. And it's kind of good in a way because I can just eyes forward and gun it. I don't have to worry about cars up ahead of me because I'm first out of the pits. There's nobody else ahead of me on track in terms of track position. Whereas if you start sort of buried in the field, you've got to worry about sort of slowing down and giving yourself a gap to the car ahead of you, but then the car behind can end up overtaking you and restarting the process. So you can kind of get balked instead of focusing on your warm-up and focusing on your mental focus, essentially, on just trying to complete the best lap you can. This first flying lap here was a 221.9. We're going to go through a bit of a lap guide here on the second flying lap here. So we're braking just before the 50% brake, and you can kind of tap the throttle on the way in there because it's an interesting way that this car drives. It's almost like when you have the front wheels turned, because they're also driving, you put a tiny bit of throttle, it kind of pulls the front end in the direction that the wheels are turned, and that's what we're doing all through here. So I haven't really got too many braking points and references, but it's just basically keeping it on the inside of all the S's and taking it nice and carefully through there. And make sure you don't understeer out of Dunlop because it's uphill, so it's so easy to understeer out into that gravel trap on the right hand side there. Maximise that gear change to 5th. Now coming into Degner, we're looking on the left hand side, braking just before the electronic flag before the 50 metre board, and braking just before the end of the curb on the left as well. Heading into Degner 2 here. It's faster to use 4th gear, but you have to absolutely nail the apex and get on the throttle early in order for that to be faster. Heading up towards the hairpin now through turn 10, braking on the end of the curb on the right hand side for turn 11. Take a nice late apex and exit in 3rd. Once again, you've got to absolutely nail the apex and get on the power early in order for that 3rd gear to actually be faster. It's followed by 200R, which we've raced through here. It can be taken flat quite easily. Maximise all the gear changes. Really maximise 5th. Actually, I shift to 6th. You can keep it in 5th and bang on the limiter. Heading into spoon, braking just after the 100 meter board, I believe it was. Absolutely nail this second apex because it leads out onto the back straight. It's much more important to get the exit correct than the entry. So you sacrifice the entry to get a really good exit. Once again, so easy to power understeer off the outside of the track there. So you have to be really, really considered with your throttle application. Purple on that sector and then braking just before the 50 meter board heading into 130R. It's funny to think that we have to brake for this corner. We never normally have to, and then braking just before the 100 meter board. There's a particular little scuff mark on the white line before the 100 meter board. That's what I was using. 4th gear on the exit of the chicane here. You can cut it a little bit, but not quite as much as you could in GT Sport. Make sure you keep it to the inside through the final turn and up across the line. That's a 221.6. Oh, where was this in the first slot? Quite frustrating. That's actually faster than my time trial time, and it would have been quite handy for me to be able to get those in some of the earlier slots. But here, it puts me provisionally on pole position. But let's see where that puts us officially after finally the Nations Cup introduction. Lovely as always, and as you can see, the Phantom Wagon is parked in the pole position spot. We were able to keep that pole position. That time was good enough for pole in this split. I happen to know Gish, however, his qualifying time only ended up being 2/10 slower. So if we were not able to achieve the 21 like we did, we would not be on pole position. So I was honestly going into this race expecting not too much of a challenge because I was having a look at the names here, and I mean absolutely zero disrespect to any driver here, but there was nobody in this lobby that jumped out as a particular concern in terms of rivaling my pace. Corey is probably the closest, but the fact that I caught up to him from the back of the field in that second slot there told me that I was faster than him on this combination. All the other names, Green Goldfish, Masumi, Warrior I've never seen before, Neff I've seen but I've never raced him, and then Gish, hardly ever seen. So I was kind of not really too concerned in terms of actually needing to fight for this win here. I was just going to try and focus on lapping cleanly, consistently, avoiding mistakes and getting the car home. Strategy in this race today, we haven't spoke about yet in this video, but it's actually a very straightforward nose stop using 1x tyre wear and 1x fuel use, so plenty of tyre and fuel available to use, and given we only have to do 8 laps here at Suzuka, it's absolute overkill. These tyres could probably last 100 laps at this tyre wear multiplier level. So yeah, easy nose stop, so it's just a straight sprint, and because that tyre wear is quite low actually, the car doesn't end up feeling too different as the race progresses. We're on the sports soft, sorry, not the sports soft, the sports hard, the slipperiest sports tyre available, and they're actually quite a bit slipperier than they were in GT Sport. I have a feeling that for GT7, the grip of all the tyres has kind of been reduced a little bit. That's how it feels to me. Don't know if that's the physics or if there's actually been a tyre grip change there, but that's how it feels to me. So quite slippery tyre, but in turn, and thanks to that fact, they're also quite robust. But as we head through this opening lap here, as you can see, that gap behind has not opened in the fashion that I hoped it to, and I actually don't get the best 130R, so the gap closes even further to about 1.5 tenths as we break into the Casio triangle. We go deep there, and I say that and point that out because I had a thought in the race when that happened. I was like, okay, that's the first lap, I went deep at the chicane. Brake early, don't make that same mistake again, and don't let the pressure of Gish behind force me into beginning to brake late, because that's when you begin to run wide on the corners and you don't get the best exit then, and that's exactly what's happened here at the Casio triangle, and Gish has an opportunity around the outside of the first turn. I decide I'm going to I'm going to defend it. It's for the lead. There's no further positions up the road because that's normally what I consider when I decide to fight or defend or whatever. If there's further positions up the road that I know that we can achieve by not fighting, I will not fight. But in this particular case, there's no further positions. I'm in the maximum position you can possibly get. I'm going to fight for this because what I learned through that first lap is that Geesh, in fact, Green Goldfish is just behind Geesh as well. These two drivers behind, they were no slouches. And, you know, I was actually quite impressed by that because I went into the race, like I said, not really expecting too much. And now all of a sudden I've got two drivers who I never expected to be racing right on my tail, putting pressure on me for this lead. So I have to be so careful and not make a mistake here. And I'm going to be choosing fourth gear on the exit here. I think Geesh has chosen third because he's really, really close. However, he's going to have an extra gear change to do when that happens as we just touch the braking zone. For the hairpin here, the gap behind just opened up ever so slightly. I run slightly wide, not getting the apex, the hairpin that I wanted. So G's just putting the pressure on me because it's so easy to begin to brake late if you've got a car right up your backside. Because what you tend to do is, if I brake a tiny bit later, that he won't have an opportunity to head up the inside. But then what you do is compromise your whole corner and you normally get a poor exit. So I've just got to open up that margin behind such that I don't have to begin to brake late to try and defend. I want to be able to brake on time, take the nice slow entry for an absolute fast nailed exit, and that's what we successfully do out of Spoon here. That gap has opened up to 7/10 as we skip ahead a lap to lap 3 heading through 130R. The gap's still about 0.6 of a second, so it hasn't really changed. It's got down to 0.5 as we're not pushing 130R, I think is the correct terminology to use there. It may look like I'm going quite slow through there, but I felt as though it was more important to keep it on the road than it was to actually sort of absolutely maximise 130R, because that's when you start making mistakes, and that is exactly how I could throw away this position in the blink of an eye. The gap is once again closed down 0.3 of a second heading through this opening snake section. Geesh doesn't really have an opportunity to get past through there because it's all flowing corners one after the other, all single file getting through there. So if you just nail the apexes, there's no getting past. But now that we're coming into the Degners, this is where the overtaking part of the track happens. You have sort of a pace and very disciplined opening of the lap, and then you get your moves done at the end of the lap. And as you can see, Geesh is taking the first opportunity he's presented with, which is the hairpin turn 11 here. He got up the inside at 10, which gave him the outside for the hairpin. Not ideal, but he can focus on trying to get the best exit he can, because normally you can try and get a switchback on the exit of the corner. You can turn from the outside and get underneath the car on the exit and get a much better straight exit than the car ahead of you, and that's what Geesh had in that particular moment. But I was able to get that third gear, I was able to slot into that third gear and get the power down, and I was able to get out of that hairpin without too much concern of Geesh dragging past me up towards Spoon. But as we head out of here now, out onto the back straight, once again a decent exit, so that's all we're focusing on here. But Geesh is going to have the slipstream now. Slipstream is not something we've talked about really in this video at all, and that's pretty much because the slipstream effect in these cars is quite minimal, almost minimal to negligible. But as we head through here, look at this moment. The back wheels get hooked on the AstroTurf, and as we hit the brakes, we catch the gravel on the outside now, which kind of puts the car all over the place, and I almost completely bin and throw away this lead in what was honestly a split second. Bloody hell, that was a moment. But somehow I managed to extend that gap out to 0.6 of a second as we begin lap 5. We skip ahead to the end of lap 6. The gap remained fairly stagnant there. I was able to put in a couple of good laps here. You can see that lap 4 with the mistake was a 2:24.4, but then lap 5 it was a tiny bit quicker, a 2:24.1. And as we head out of here, we'll see what this one is going to be. It's a 2:24.0. So, a couple of good laps there, but Geesh has closed that gap. That's 0.4 of a second now. He's not going to be within move range here at turn 1. I would say moves at turn 1 are quite difficult to get done at the best of times, but I don't get the best turn 1. Look what happens here. That was a mistake. I think I was in the wrong gear. I didn't downshift to third for that second, for turn 2 exactly. I kept it in 4th and the car just went out a little bit wide. So that gap is now down to 0.2 of a second. Now I said earlier, this section is not an overtaking section, but if you can put pressure on the car ahead of you and force them to run a tiny bit wide on one of the corners, normally they end up messing up the rest of the sequence. So it does give an opportunity for the car behind to get a tiny bit of an overlap. And once that overlap is started through that opening section, you can sometimes complete a move that way. But it's not so much an outright, if you think of an overtaking spot, you think of the snake section. It's the connection between those two ideas is not present here for Sector 1 at Suzuka. However, it is present out of Degner 2 as we get quite a bad exit. I don't think Jish gets an any better exit than me. So he's not going to be close enough to get this move done at the hairpin, but we're coming up towards pretty much 1.5 laps to go in this race. Given that I've managed to actually stay in the lead for all of this race, I'm now going to find myself rather disappointed if I don't actually bring home this victory, because I've done it for 6 laps successfully. All I've got to do is just that for 2 more laps and I've done it. If it was a case of Jish got past me on the opening lap and drove away into the distance, then there's not really too much I could do about that, and I would take and settle for the second spot. But given that I know over the course of a lap I can stick ahead of Jish, I would like to do it for 8 laps in a row and bring home a victory in this particular race. But Jish has not been able to make an indent on this particular lap. He had an opportunity at the hairpin coming off the back of my mistake heading into turn 1 on this lap. But throughout the course, as we're going around 130R this time, make sure don't push the exit. Jish doesn't push the exit either. The gap does open up ever so slightly. Make sure we nail this chicane as well, because it's going to be quite important to get a good run out onto the main straight, because Jish right under my back bumper there, and if I got a poor exit, he would have probably been close enough to get something done at turn 1, which is a genuine overtaking opportunity, but it can be quite difficult if you're not close enough. But on this final lap, let's take a listen to some of the throttle control that I had to use to make sure I keep this position through Sector 1. So a quite difficult and quite complicated car to drive. I touched briefly before. It seems as though if the front wheels are turned and you apply a tiny bit of throttle, that extra throttle can help pull the front wheels in the direction you're turning. Start to apply too much throttle and the wheels will spin up. You'll break traction on that front end, and then the momentum of the rest of the car behind you will end up pushing the car straight instead. But for some reason, those tiny taps of throttle all the way through that first sector just helped to keep the car pointed in the direction of the corner, and it helped you carry more speed, because if you can... I found myself being able to carry more speed if I was able to use that tiny throttle tap technique in order to help pull the car around the corner. But through this lap here, Jish has not been able to get close enough, and that's crucial here, because he's only really got one more genuine opportunity at trying to get the move done, and he's half a second behind coming up into that said opportunity, which presents itself at the Casio Triangle. I get a decent 130R here, so Jish is going to have to pull off something quite mammoth in order to get this move done. He brakes very late, taking that last opportunity to the best of his ability, and I think he was thinking at that particular stage, I'm either going to get it done or I'm just going to give it back, and in this case, he wasn't able to get it done. Yes! Haha! Oh dear. Man, that was intense. Oh dear, that's it. I'm leaving that. I'm done with the touring car. Oh my god. Done with the Fanta wagon. Where was that pace in qualifying in the first 2 slots? Like, lack of practice time meant the first 2 slots were also practice. Oh dear. And we managed to bring home that sensational, hard-fought victory. Jish put the pressure on there. He absolutely did. Fair play to the driver there. as I said, I didn't really expect a massive fight for the win here, but I got exactly that, a fight for the win, and it was quite a good fight with quite a lot of pressure from G, so he did the absolute best he could to try and grab that off me, but I was able to keep it cool, calm and collected, and having the benefit of starting on pole position really helped consolidate that win there and really helped lead the way to what would have been 8 successful laps of defending that lead for a 260 point result. So it's actually quite a decent result at the end of the day. Now that's for the win in slot 3. I still would have had more points if I got 6th in the first slot, so it just goes to show that the drivers do dwindle away as the night goes on, and that's why the points drop as well. But 260 points and a victory, I'm quite happy with that. Took quite a while, took a long time, took 3 slots, which I generally don't like to do because it ends up taking so long and it ends up being so draining. But on this particular evening, for 260 points, it did end up being worth it. But that's going to be the end of the video today, so do hit the like button if you enjoyed, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos and streams from me. Do leave a comment as well, as questions, comments and constructive criticism as always, very much appreciated. But that's going to be the end of this one today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.